Hi guys, Sugar here with a new video, and this video will be my ranged and healer tier list video for 3v3. It will be a prediction video for Dragonflight, and I decided to do the ranged tier list and the healer tier list in one video because I wanted to give my viewers somewhat more information directly before Dragonflight will come out, and I don't know if I will have enough time to make a second video just about healers, so I prefer to do it all at the same time. Now, I want to clarify, it is a prediction, so we are not talking about current strength on pre-patch or even on beta. Of course, I do take a few information from the beta to enforce my prediction, but also just historically, is the class doing good in 3v3? Does it have a lot of comps? Which comps are at disposal and which comps are actually good? And that's all meshed into one tier list. Of course, you can take solo shuffle as an example. I do a tier list for solo shuffle. I already did it, so you could also watch it on my channel if you are so interested about solo shuffle. But this is 3v3 organized gameplay, so it means you choose your own comps, you know your strength and you know your weaknesses, and you can compensate with different comps, different classes, different specs, and then you can actually be performing quite well. Now let's talk right away about the tier list. S tier is God tier, A tier is meta, B tier is average, C tier is underperforming, and D tier, it means that it's garbage. I think there will be not a lot of classes at D tier. I'm going to talk class per class, so you will see the timestamps below. We will do the start of 3v3 and then class, and then start of 3v3 healers, and then classes or specs, so you can already jump to those specs whenever you need. So let's talk about warlocks. And first and foremost, I'm going to talk about affliction. Affliction is going to be very good in 3v3 because you can choose your comps. But also in general, I feel like it is the time of affliction. Affliction will be somewhat tanky, but also do a lot of damage. Now versus melees, you are not as tanky as versus casters, so casters will always have difficulties versus affliction warlocks, but I'm going to also take that into account. For me, affliction warlock is a meta spec. It is not S tier. I feel like other classes, other specs in the ranged tier list are S tier. Affliction does have clear strength. It will top meters because it just is made for that. It is basically going to multi-dot multiple targets, and the total damage you should actually split it in 3 because you are multi-dotting. Your damage will be a lot of pad, and then you will burst at one point, and that pad damage will be lethal. But it is not like it is going to be one-shotting someone like, let's say, a Devastation Evoker. Now, the problem is about Destruction Warlock is they still need to cast a lot of spells, and there are few comps that can make Destruction work. It's more restrictive, it is also more hard to play, and historically it is normally not the top dog of Season 1, because Season 1 is basically a stat deprivation of your class, so it means you will not have 30% haste normally. At least I suspect that we are not going to have 30% haste. So you will have longer casted spells, you will have more difficulties to actually get your casters off, especially with all the micro CCs, micro interrupts, everything that can actually stop you. So for me it will be I want to put it in C tier, but I think there are other classes at C tier, so for me it's going to be a B tier, it's average. I think Destruction Warlock with a Devastation Evoker is kind of good because you want to stop the Evoker, but you also want to stop the Destruction. You can also play Mage Lock, so basically play with an Arcane Mage or a Frost Mage or even a Fire Mage with some builds. I think it could you could make it work. Of course, it is not the most meta spec of Warlocks, so you will not see a lot of destruction, but it doesn't mean that it's bad, it just means like the other specs are performing how they should be performing. So I think all the classes should be around A or B tier max, and the S tiers are kinda overtuned and should get in line towards the A tier or the B tiers. And the same for C tier and D tier, they should go for the B tier and the A tier, so they need buffs to actually compete, at least in 3v3 organized gameplay. Demonology Warlocks are going to be S tier. They are very, very tanky. If Affliction Warlocks is tanky for you, Demonology Warlocks are definitely tanky. They do not lose anything by being tanky, while Affliction Warlock will lose a lot of damage by trying to survive the damage. You can also set up your own cross CC. So basically, you don't really need your healer to CC for you to do a complete cross CC. You can play a Mage Lock variant. You can play LSD. You can also play LSD2. I also saw some boomies work with a Demonology Warlock. You can really work with a lot of specs and classes, and just because of that flexibility, I think it's going to be very S tier in Season 1. It will fall down eventually with nerfs because it is very nerf prone, and Demonology Warlocks, they scale with secondary stats, but not as much as the other specs. So in Season 1, it's going to be quite strong because you will have base stats, you will have base abilities, base talents that are going to help you. And once the Season 2, Season 3 are going to actually be online, you will fall over to the A tier or the B tier, depending on nerfs, depending on the current meta, of course. Arcane Mage, I think Arcane Mages are legit A tier. I would even say that they are on par with Affliction Warlocks. The good thing is about about Arcane Mages, they do damage all the time, and that's not pad damage, so it can one-shot you at any time. Of course, it is highly trainable, but they have a lot of mobility, a lot of defensives to make that training, or at least that kiting, less like difficult. It is more bearable than, let's say, a Destruction Warlock getting like trained down by 2 meaties. An Arcane Mage getting trained means that they are actually wasting their time most of the time. Of course, you can die if you use your mobility badly. You can die, and that's why it's a A tier and not an S tier spec. But it is definitely better than Shadowlands. You have multiple schools now, although it's still restrictive on the spells itself. I think it's definitely better. Frost mages are going to be at the same level as Destruction Warlock because for me they are kind of the same. They need to cost a lot, or they can play a more instant based spec, but whenever you get trained, your damage will be quite patty. It will not be like super high damaging abilities, damaging positioning, and whatever you can do as a frost mage is going to be more bearable for those melees to actually survive. I think it seems like you're doing a lot of damage on the meters, but again, it is very much patty. It's not like Affliction Warlock patty. It's like patty, you're going to slow all the targets, all the enemies, but that's it. You have your second DPS, of course, that is going to help you to kill those targets, but I don't think by themselves they are going to kill someone if they are trained by 2 melees. They are pretty much like on the verge of dying, and they get helped by the healer and by the other DPS to survive and to thrive. That by itself is a strategy, so it doesn't matter if you are really top DPS or top anything, as long as you can win with that comp. But that's why it's B tier for me, because you cannot really solo carry like games. People are just not going to let you cast. The good thing is a Frost Mage with a Destruction Warlock, that comp itself is not bad. It's actually very good. But if you put a Frost Mage with any other spec or Destruction Warlock with any other spec, it is not going to be performing as much as right now. Now, BM Hunter. I think BM Hunter entries are going to be very good with Jungle Cleave, and I'm going to maybe overrate it a bit, but Season 1 is always the season where BM is actually thriving. So for me, it's going to be very meta, based off historical seasons, but also just in general, BM Hunters don't need as much secondary stats to actually make it work. If you play jungle, basically you win by either cleaving a lot, so in Shadowlands it was a lot of cleaving, or you can also play just with CC and setups, and once you have a good setup, you can generally win a game based on CC. And with your Feral Druid actually doing most of the work right now, because it is actually a S tier spec, I think BM Hunters are just not bad. They are just good. They have a lot of damage, a lot of CDs, they have kiting, they have survivability, Roar of Sacrifice is still a thing. You can basically win games because of that. So I think BM Hunters are going to be very good. Also, Roar of Sacrifice is very good versus Devastation Evokers. People are like complaining about one-shots, but they are not going to one-shot if they are not critting. And Roar of Sacrifice by itself is going to be very, very helpful. Now let's talk about Balanced Druid. Balanced Druid is going to be very good, I think, in trees, depending on comps. But I think very good in comps and not very good by themselves. So it means I have to judge Balanced Druid by themselves. Like if you put any class other than Balanced Druid will that comp work? And generally, the answer is yes. Balanced Druid by itself doesn't do like kill damage. It can play like comps where it's going to do a lot of Starfall damage, a lot of Moonfire, like Sunfire, like padding, and that by itself could be very, very dangerous if you're like paired with an Affliction Warlock or paired with an Elemental Shaman or paired with a Demon Hunter that also has a lot of damage. So I think for me it's going to be the top dog of B tier. It's really close of meta, but I can't put it in meta because those other specs are just simply better in general, like damage wise. Of course, they could do, because that's a prediction. I think they are not going to buff Balanced Druid damage because they just nerfed it. What they could do is maybe put a PvP modifier, but nothing can indicate that they are not going to nerf it. They might nerf it in PvP and just let it slide like this. But the good thing is about Balanced Druid is it's not only about the damage, it's a lot about the mobility, the CC that you can provide, the off heals, the survivability, the pad. You have a lot of great things going on, but I think my prediction is in season 1 your damage will still be lackluster. I don't think they are like going to prioritize buffing Balanced Druid instead of like, let's say, a warrior. I think warriors are like top priority to get those modifiers gone from that class, while Balanced Druid, I think it's going to stay like this for now. Devastation Evoker, I think in trees is going to be meta, but for the wrong reasons. I think Blizzard are just not going to nerf Devastation. They should nerf Devastation, but not the way that you would think. I think the best thing that they could do for Devastation is to actually nerf the one-shots and spread that nerf, or at least that buff those other spells to the consistent damage, so you can actually be performing, so you could actually be somewhat useful in mid-game, in the beginning of the game, at the end of the game, that you will feel like a better class. Because for me at the moment, evokers are very gimmicky. They can one shot and they will still one shot because people are just going to get caught off guard. But the nullifying shroud, whenever you see that in 3v3 organized gameplay, you are just on the mic with the other guys. You just say, look, we are not going to engage for 30 seconds. If you're not engaged for 30 seconds, then it becomes a lot easier to kill because you can actually hard CC the evoker. It is also very, very squishy if they don't have nullifying shroud and all those walls that they have and such. So I think it's very gimmicky. That's why it's A tier, because it still can work. I think in season 1 they will not nerf it because they want the poster boy of Dragonflight to be performing well. I think in season 2 it will get a nerf bat and nobody will play it anymore. I think Preservation will be the spec that evokers are going to play from season 2 and onwards. I think they just don't have a lot of tools at their disposal as well. Like, it's very monotone how they play. IMO, I think it's very monotone. I think people could always disagree with me, but I don't think they have like one saving grace outside of the one shots that they have. And once their one shot is going to get eventually nerfed in season 2, they will have nothing left. So I think the Blizzard developers should go back to the chalkboard and actually go back to designing a better spec, because I don't think it's a very well designed spec. It is fun, but I think one-shotting people is going to be fun. But once the damage is going to be gone, will a lot of people play Devastation? That's the question. Elemental Shaman is going to be on the verge of S tier in trees, because I think 3v3 organized gameplay is much better for Elemental Shaman. They can choose their own comps, they can do whatever they want, and they will do a lot of damage. While in Solo Shuffle, if you are like so unlucky, they will not play for you and they will play against you. They know that you're going to get trained all the time, and they will play for themselves and try to actually get 3 wins and you get 0 wins, right? So I think in 3v3 they are like on the verge of S tier, but they are like, I would say, on the same level as Affliction and Arcane Mage. I will put in between, because I think Elemental Shaman is really strong. They have a lot of burst, they have a lot of ways to do burst, you have a lot of builds going on that you are never going to face Elemental Shamans the same way as other Elemental Shamans are going to play. So it's always going to be a surprise. I think just because of that fact, it is going to be fun to play against, but also fun to play with. and being always different, always having different builds is going to be a very good thing for Dragonflight. And so that's why for me it's a meta spec. And I think it's not going to get nerfed in season 1. I think it's even going to get buffed because somehow, some way, it's underperforming on some aspects of the game, like for example PvE, but also PvP. For in Soul Shuffle, and I don't know if they are going to balance classes based on Soul Shuffle, but if they do, I think the balance in general is going to be very, very wacky or very, very different from what we know in Shadowlands, in BFA, Legion, and whatever. If they are going to base it on Soul Shuffle, I think people will have to brace themselves because the next class, which is Fire Mage, is going to be insane. I think in season 1 they will get a buff somehow, some way. People say that it's unplayable, but they are mostly thinking about solo shuffle. I think in trees, organized 3v3, it's still going to be very good in RMPs because it's always about setups. You're not going to you're overkilling in Shadowlands often in your setups. If it's like someone is in CC and they will stay in CC, you're going to overkill with your combust. Often and not, you win in your three first seconds of your combust. But now your combust, you can go for a longer combust, but you also can go for a more casted fire mage. And I think fire mages could also play in wizard cleaves for some reason, because I think if you have multiple casters that you can play with each other, I think fire mages could be something very interesting. I have to test it, but I don't know if I want to make a lot of time for that. But I think for me, it's going to be a B tier spec. I think arcane mages are just a bit better. I think fire are really on the same level as frost mage. People complain about fire mage because they play solo shuffle, but in 3v3 organized gameplay, it's really not the same. Okay, fire mages are getting purged, but it was always the case in Shadowlands. Of course, you had like the legendary that could put 3 barriers on you, but again, I think you could also just pop combust whenever people are CC'd, right? You don't need to combust in the open whenever Elemental Shaman is free. Like, you're just getting, you're actually asking to get purged, and nobody is actually doing that as a fire mage. Nobody actually did that in Shadowlands, so I think they should not do that in Dragonflight, and people should just play differently whenever you play a fire mage. Hunter, I think I'm going to, again, that's my prediction. It is going to be the most C tier class. I think I'm not as dramatic as other people saying about I think just in 3v3 organized gameplay, you just have a lot less comps to play with. You can play Cuphead, you can play Doug if you want. You can also play Jungle, but that's it's not the best variation. I think BM and Survivor is better. But by themselves, they are quite damaging. People say they have no burst, but I saw on the beta right now they have some burst. I just think it's just hard to do because in Shadowlands it was very face rolly. A lot of people complained about some justified it, some not, and I think it just deserves the C spot for Dragonflight. I don't think they will get a buff for season 1. I think it's more due for season 2. People don't really want to buff because whenever it gets buffs, it just jumps at S tier because it can just one-shot people. So for now, I think it will be a C tier. It just doesn't mean that it's not possible to climb with. I didn't say that. I think is just a tad bit harder to make it work in trees than, let's say, in RBGs or choose or even in social. I think in social it's not as bad as people would say. But that's of course another discussion for another day. Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest is the second best ranged DPS in 3v3 organized gameplay. In Soul Shuffle, it's already very good because you can set up a lot of things with your own spells. You can do a lot of damage. Everything is pretty much like instant from the looks of it. But the good thing is about Shadow Priest, it's actually going to get better if you are with organized 3v3 teams. Like if you are on voice and you say, look, I'm going to stun, then silence, then go for a fear. Like all this is not communicatable via Soul Shuffle. You're going to do your thing and hope that your DPS notices it and then goes for a burst. But in 3v3 organized gameplay, I think it's going to be even better, and that's why for me it's an S tier spec. It is a monster of a spec. I think it will not get nerfed. It will get nerfed in season 2. I think in season 2 or mid-season, it will go eventually to A or B tier because the utility is still there. But I think they will just butcher the DPS damage because I think people just don't like Shadow Priest to be very damagey. and it will be a repeat of Shadowlands. In Shadowlands, it was also season 1 S tier, and then it just became a B tier, A tier class because they nerfed too much, and here we are. Now in Dragonflight, I think talents are very good for Shadow Priest, and that's why for me it is a S tier spec. Now I'm going to jump right in the healer tier list, but give me a second. Okay, here we are on the healer tier list, and I want to preface that I think no healer deserves a D spot on a 3v3 organized tier list. I think it's not bad. It's not going to be garbage. I think every healer is going to be playable, especially with Dragonflight being how it is right now. It is going to be actually very good for a lot of healers that are going to alt other healers. Like for example, if you play in Resto Druid and you want to play with a Mistweaver Monk and then you want to play with a Resto Shaman, it is going to be very possible in comparison with Shadowlands, where Holy Priest was literally 50% played over the whole season. Now it's going to be very different, but preservation is going to be very insane. I'm going to talk first and foremost about preservation. I think it's no surprise that it's going to be a S tier spec. That's also my prediction. I think they still have to nerf the mana regen. It is still on a PvE modifier. It should be a PvP modifier, which means that they will need to drink at one point. But right now, on the beta, but even on pre-patch or anything, you do not drop any mana while healing or DPSing. And that's something that they should remove it before the season starts. If they don't, I think it will be the Preservation Evoker slideshow. Everyone will play that. It will be a 50% play rate like Holy Priest, and that's it. It doesn't mean that the other healers are bad, it just means that preservation is just too easy. You will win in dampening games, and since in 3v3 you get a 10% dampening, I think, from the start, it just means that you're going to blow a lot of mana, and since they are very mana efficient and they do get a lot of mana regen, they will win just all the time after 5 minutes or 6 minutes of gameplay. So just because of that reason, it is going to be meta, or at least god tier. I think they really need to nerf it. If they don't, then my prediction really sucks, because I'm actually basing on the fact that they are going to nerf it. Because if they don't, it's basically S++. It's like 2 tiers above everything, but for now it's going to be S tier. It's going to be very good. You have a lot of spells to save your allies. You can displace some allies too. Your hover is insane. Not being able to get slowed is literally better than the freedom that a holy priest can give, holy paladin can give. And I mean, they have to nerf it. If they don't, then it's a S++ spec. I'm going to discuss about it whenever the season will start, and hopefully that prediction will give me some sort of indication of the meta. Now, Disc Priest, a lot of people are putting it in C tier or B tier because it does lose on mana. Now, I think they will have to put a better PvP modifier for mana, or at least for atonement something, because the good thing is about Disc Priest is whenever you heal with atonement, it is very efficient. It's a lot better than a lot of classes actually are mana wise, but the burstiness of some classes just makes it a bit hard to heal through atonement. Like if you're playing versus the Devastation Evoker, chances are you're not going to do a lot of damage because you will not be able to do a penance on the enemy. You will do a penance on the ally to try to top him off just because of that spell. You will just spam Radiance, you will spam Flash Heal, and you will get very quickly. And just because of that fact, I think in season 1 it is going to get buffed. For me, it is going to be very high B tier. It will be on the verge of meta. If they do buff it substantially, it will jump into A tier really quickly. You will see that really B tier or C tier doesn't mean that it's bad. It will, me myself, if I play Priest, because I will probably play Priest, it is going to be Disc Priest. It is going to be performing for myself. I will say I will perform on it as a Disc Priest in Soul Shuffle and 3v3 and 2v2. I just think whenever it's going to be very dampening, you're going to lose on mana, and whenever you lose on mana, that's really bad. And I hope they put a modifier on it, but we'll see. Holy Paladin is going to be I know that CDU said that there is a build that you could play basically being melee and heal with deep like your damage with your Avenging Crusader pretty much. But I don't think it will be viable in 3v3. I think it's going to be very good in 2v2 though. But in 3v3, you're going to be melee form, so you're going to get CC, you're going to get damage, you're going to actually die really quickly. Because whenever your CDs are gone, and then you're going to actually eventually lose the game. If it's not because of the mana, it's going to be because of the actual easiness of targeting the Holy Priest, because some classes are going to be max range, while for example Holy Paladin, if they are going to play that build that Sidu said, they are going to be very close, and if you're playing versus a Unholy DK Demon Hunter, this is not going to work. You're going to get cleaved and it's going to be over. Basically, you're going to be dependent on the enemies that you're facing. If you're playing versus Unholy DK Demon Hunter and you're going to go in their face, you're going to lose in the minute or two that is going to happen. There is like no option. You're not going to survive that. So just because of that, I think it's going to be on the same level Disc Priest. Again, it's not bad. I just think that it is very, very risky to actually do that. I think in Soul Shuffle it's going to be alright because people are just not going to switch directly, except if it's going to be a rank 1 or glad match. So in general, you're going to be able to do that. But in 3v3 organized gameplay, if I see a Holy Paladin next to me, I'm going to say, look, let's switch. I'm going to strangulate that Holy Paladin, and we're going to do a hard switch. And that Holy Paladin will just blow all the CDs, and then we will just do rinse and repeat that process. Resto Shaman, I think I'm not as dramatic as people would say. I think it's C tier, not D tier. It's C tier, because simply it is good, but the healing throughput is just not good enough to survive damage. If a melee train is going to go on you, like for example on Holy DK with a Demon Hunter, you're not going to play long. You're going to blow all your CDs and then you're going to eventually die. But Resto Shaman in 2v2 are going to be king because they have Lasso, they have Thunderstorm, they have a lot of CC at their disposal. Basically having a stun and then a Hex, which is going to be applicable, I think, with Nature Swiftness, if I'm not mistaken, because I didn't try it recently, but I think it can. Or if it doesn't, then I'm like, I'll just take it back. But it doesn't really matter because you can still cast it. You can cast Hex, and then whenever Hex is going to be done, you do Lasso, and basically they will just trinket it. I think Resto Shaman is going to be very good in 2v2, but in 3v3, there is a problem where you're going to get focused eventually, and your healing throughput is just not good enough to be playing a shaman, because you want to weave some damage, you want to weave some purge, but if you're GCD starved and you're using a GCD for the wrong reasons, then it becomes very difficult for you to survive. Resto Druid, I think Resto Druid is on the verge of S tier, but the problem is there will be a difference between a Preservation Evoker and a Resto Druid, and just because of that, I need a tier to actually give that difference, because I'm not putting Preservation in S+, I'm putting it in S, so Resto Druid will be a A tier spec. I think in general, you're going to have a great time. You have a lot of great healing. Invigoration is going to be very good as a talent for Resto Druid. You will be a very passive healer, but your Cyclone is still very useful. It's a unbreakable SCC that only can break with, let's say, a Divine Shield or Mass Dispel, basically. So for me, it's going to be a A-tier spec just because of that fact. And it's going to be a very fun spec to play as well. They have a lot of comps, a lot of great things going on. The mobility is still good, and you can still do insane plays just because of your mobility. Holy Priest. I think Holy Priest, people are rating it in A tier for some reason. For me, it's on the same level as Disc Priest. They have a lot of cast heals, and you can say everything you want, but if you're going to get trained, or if the people are like just okayish and they know how to do a focus silence or focus interrupt macro, or just press your portrait and just silence on you on the right time, you're going to actually suffer because you don't really have a lot of cost instant healing. You have some instant healings, but if you use that, it's basically your possibility of surviving a lot lower. It's going to make your surviving actually a bit tedious. You don't have Greater Fate anymore, you don't have the Legendary and the Force anymore to actually perform well. And you have talents to actually compensate that, but you will have to use some talents just to have better healing. And so you cannot take everything. So just for me, this fact makes it Holy Priest a B tier spec. And also I don't see them buff it in Season 1, so that's my prediction for Season 1. And I hope whenever I do the video, whenever Season 1 is started, I'm actually getting some information and some analytics, I'm going to go back to the video and hopefully tell you if I was right or not. Now, the last spec, which is probably the hardest to actually rate, because there are games where it feels literally S tier, because people are just not going to focus you or focus your healer, which is the Mistweaver, and they will do insane amount of healing and nobody is going to die. But then there are games where you play versus a Resto Shaman or Elemental Shaman or something that can really interrupt you from afar, and you will not be able to heal at clutch times. And just because of that fact, I think it is going to be... I want to put it in A tier because of the potential, and you just need to play with classes. Don't play with melees. If you play with classes, you will be instantly C tier. So I'm going to give you 2 ratings. Mistweaver with classes, so if you play with a Wizard Cleave, let's say a Mage Lock, it is going to be A tier, because they are not going to expand a interrupt or silence on the Mistweaver whenever the Warlock is actually free casting or the Mage is free casting. They're not going to suicide like that. So that's why it's going to be A tier. But if you play somehow, some way with a Warrior and then Retribution Paladin or something, it is going to straight be a C tier spec on the same level as Resto Shaman, because you're going to get interrupted on everything you have. Of course, you have ways to actually heal without getting interrupted with a Zen Focus T, or let's say with a big cocoon to actually save someone. But if you're only counting that, that's not enough to win games. So for me, it's going to be A tier, because I assume Mistweaver will play and know their strengths and weaknesses and will play with wizards. But if you do play with melees, it's going to be a C tier spec. It has insane throughput. It could feel like a S tier spec. It could feel like a C tier spec. But I assume that people know how to play, how they play their class. So I will assume also that they will play with wizards, or at least with wizards, and make it work, right? So for me, this is my tier list for healers. I think in general they are very homogenized, and there's just like one outlier, which is basically preservation, and I count on the fact that they are going to nerf it somehow, some way on the PvP modifiers for healing and for mana. I just want a mana nerf. If they don't nerf the mana for some reason, then we are going to live a 50% preservation evoker meta, and we don't want that, the same as Holy Priest had. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below what you think about the range tier list, about the healer tier list. And I know it's a long video, but I wanted to make one big video about ranged and healers, so we are actually up and ahead with the video schedules, and I'm going to try to make a 2v2 tier list before the start of the season. But I think 2v2 is it's a very hard bracket to actually judge, because you have classes that are very king, like for example, like rogues and hunters are still going to be king of 2s, while some classes, like for example affliction warlocks and frost mages and destruction warlocks, they just lack the amounts of freedom to be performing as much as a hunter or a rogue. But that might be a bad take, but for me that's my opinion. So thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Again, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet, and be sure to stay safe. We will catch each other very soon with a new video. Have a great day. Bye.